Claire Whitmore hated kids like Marquis Jefferson, the quiet ones who didn't flinch when she stared too long and didn't shrink to make her feel safe. From the moment she saw him sitting under that tree, calm, black, and alone, she decided he didn't belong. He didn't smile. He didn't explain himself. He didn't act afraid. So when he picked up his phone to call his mom, Claire snapped. She grabbed it, smashed it, shoved him, then screamed like she was the one under attack. She made herself the victim and painted him the threat, certain that the police would believe her, because they always did. What Claire didn't know was that Marquise's mother wasn't just another parent. She was Mayor Denise Jefferson, and Marquise wasn't just any boy. He had strength in his silence and power in his name. Claire thought it would be easy. She didn't know she was starting a war she couldn't win. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Sunlight filtered gently through the tangled branches of the old willow tree, casting playful patterns of shade across Marquis Jefferson's sketchbook. It was his favorite spot in the city park, a quiet, hidden corner where the outside world seemed to pause, offering him rare moments of peace. Marquis, just 13 but wise beyond his years, sat cross-legged on the soft grass, leaning comfortably against the ancient tree trunk as he alternated between reading a worn science fiction novel and sketching imaginative worlds of his own creation. His dark eyes sparkled with curiosity and quiet determination behind thick-framed glasses, and though slender and soft-spoken, there was a thoughtful strength in the way he moved and observed his surroundings. Marquis had learned early how important it was to notice things, details others overlooked. Growing up taught him the importance of awareness, caution, and understanding the deeper currents running beneath the surface of their community. In the distance, beyond the peaceful hum of cicadas and the faint laughter of children playing, Marquis could occasionally make out the clipped tones of heated conversations, drifting from the direction of the community center. His mother was there, navigating yet another delicate discussion about the city's mounting tensions. Tensions Marquis didn't fully grasp, but which he felt subtly vibrating through every interaction around him. Yet, beneath his willow tree, the problems of the world felt distant, softened by the breeze that rustled the pages of his book and stirred the leaves overhead. Marquis's pencil moved gently across his sketch pad, bringing life to intricate scenes of imagined cities floating amongst the stars. Each stroke was deliberate, careful, and patient, reflecting his calm, introspective nature. Pausing briefly, Marquis glanced around the park. It was filled with people, a diverse mix of families and couples, teenagers tossing frisbees, elderly residents walking their dogs. Yet, despite the peaceful setting, Marquis knew not everyone viewed one another with equal warmth or trust. He had overheard his mother's late-night phone calls, glimpsed the strained expressions at city meetings, and had begun to understand that beneath the city's pleasant surface lay layers of complexity and tension waiting to erupt. His gaze shifted subtly, drawn inexplicably toward a woman standing near a cluster of benches. She seemed oddly out of place, stiffly observing the area, her eyes narrowed and her posture rigid. Marquis noted her blonde hair pulled tightly back, the pale blue sweater that seemed too heavy for the mild afternoon weather, and the way she appeared to scrutinize him from afar. He felt a strange unease ripple softly within him, but quickly dismissed it, returning his attention to the comforting routine of sketching. Yet, even as he focused once more on his drawing, Marquis couldn't entirely shake off the lingering sense of discomfort. It wasn't the first time he'd felt this subtle scrutiny, these small moments of suspicion or judgment, but as always, he pushed it gently aside, trusting the comforting permanence of his willow tree to keep the world safely at bay. He checked his watch, a gift from his mother, reminding him she was never far away, and smiled quietly. She'd be finished soon, and they'd head home together, sharing stories of their day. Marquis took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh scent of grass and earth, and lost himself again in the tranquility of imagination, completely unaware of the storm gathering silently, watching him closely from across the park. A breeze passed through the branches overhead, stirring the willow leaves like a quiet warning. Marquis remained immersed in his sketch pad, drawing smooth arcs that shaped a futuristic skyline beneath twin suns, unaware that just yards away, a woman had begun to fix her gaze on him with growing intensity. Claire Whitmore stood near a row of neatly painted benches, arms crossed over her pale blue sweater, her mouth pressed into a thin, uncertain line. Her eyes followed Marquis like she was watching for sudden movement, her posture alert in the way of someone who had already made up her mind. To a casual observer, she might have looked concerned, but her eyes, too sharp, too narrow, betrayed something colder. She stepped forward. "Hi there," she said with a tight smile, pausing a few feet from where Marquis sat. "You okay, sweetheart? You waiting for someone?" Marquis glanced up, caught off guard, but not alarmed. He closed his sketchbook gently, giving a polite nod. "Yes, ma'am. Just waiting for my mom." Claire tilted her head, studying him like he had spoken in code. She looked around deliberately, as if expecting someone else to emerge from behind the trees. "You come here often?" Marquis hesitated. "Sometimes," he replied. "It's a quiet spot. I like to draw." Claire stepped a little closer, eyes scanning the grass, the path, the bushes behind him. "You're not with any of those boys, are you? The ones hanging around near the street earlier?" Marquis frowned slightly, confused. "No, ma'am. I came here by myself." She nodded slowly, then took another step in. "You sure? Just seems odd, you sitting here by yourself. You're not scouting, are you?" "Scouting?" Marquis echoed, eyebrows raised. She pressed on, lowering her voice but leaning in. "You know, for a gang, they send young ones ahead sometimes to watch. Pick out targets." "I'm just drawing," Marquis said, still calm, but now shrinking slightly in his seat, unsure where this was going. "I was reading too. That's all." Claire folded her arms again, glancing around as if waiting for someone to confirm her suspicion. "You got a phone?" Marquis reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled it out slowly, showing it in his open palm. "That's a nice one," she said, her tone tight. "Bet it wasn't cheap. Did your mom give you that? Or did you find it somewhere?" Marquis's heart picked up a beat. "My mom gave it to me," he said softly, holding it tighter. Claire's voice began to rise, loud enough now that a woman walking her dog across the field turned her head. "I don't mean to sound rude," Claire said, louder than necessary, "but it's important to be vigilant. You never know these days. Kids, especially boys like you, sometimes get mixed up in the wrong things." Marquis sat frozen, unsure what to say, eyes darting as more heads began to turn. Claire was no longer pretending. She looked down at him like he had already done something wrong. "I think I'm going to call someone," she said sharply, pulling her phone from her purse with shaking hands, though her voice now carried the self-assuredness of someone who wanted to be seen doing the right thing, just to be safe. "We can't have anything happen to the kids around here. Not with someone like you lurking under trees." Marquis stood up slowly, trying to explain himself again, but Claire was already dialing, already backing up, her voice rising with theatrical urgency. "He's acting suspicious. I asked him a few simple questions, and now he's getting defensive. He might be armed." Across the park, phones came out, people started watching, and the calm beneath the willow tree shattered like glass. Claire's voice pierced the calm afternoon air sharply, shattering the peaceful stillness like glass against pavement. Her shrill cries echoed across the open spaces of the park, jolting heads upward and pulling curious glances from people who moments ago had been lost in their leisurely routines. A couple walking their dogs stopped abruptly, turning their heads in unison toward the unfolding scene, their eyes widening with concern and confusion. Marquis stood frozen beneath the sprawling branches of the willow tree, his sketchbook now trembling in his grip, his heart thumped heavily inside his chest, each beat reverberating in his ears like distant thunder. He glanced around nervously, desperate to catch someone's eyes, someone who might understand or at least question what was happening, but each face that looked his way only mirrored confusion, suspicion, or uncertainty. Claire's pale cheeks flushed deep crimson as she thrust a finger violently in Marquise's direction, her voice rising steadily, filled with manufactured panic and hostility. "Stay right there!" she shouted, her words punctuated by dramatic gestures. "Don't you dare move, boy! I've already called for help. I see exactly what you're doing." A rush of fear tightened Marquise's throat, the heat of embarrassment and anxiety spreading across his face. With trembling fingers, he instinctively reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out his phone. Desperate now to contact his mother, she was nearby, and surely she could help him navigate whatever madness had overtaken this woman. His breath quickened, short and shallow, as he fumbled to unlock the device. Claire's eyes flicked toward the phone in his hand, widening in dramatic horror. Without warning, she lunged toward Marquis with shocking speed, her hand grasping and clawing at his wrist with vicious determination. Marquis instinctively recoiled, trying to protect his phone, but her fingers caught hold of it, violently tearing it from his grip. The phone slipped helplessly from his fingers, arcing through the air before crashing onto the hard concrete path, shattering its screen into a web of sharp, splintered lines. Marquis felt his heart sink. His pulse quickened further, racing like a frantic rhythm through his veins. "My phone!" he shouted, voice cracking with genuine distress. Without thinking, he reached forward to retrieve it, hoping it might still function. Desperate now to connect with someone, anyone, who could help. Before he could pick it up, Claire moved again, this time shoving him roughly. The unexpected violence of her push sent Marquis stumbling backward, nearly falling onto the grass. Pain and shock flashed through him, his mind reeling from confusion at her sudden physical aggression. He stared down at his trembling hands, now reddened by scratches from Claire's fingernails, tiny beads of blood emerging in thin lines across his forearm. "He attacked me!" Claire screamed at the top of her lungs, recoiling theatrically and clasping her hands over her heart. She staggered backward dramatically, feigning breathlessness as if she had barely survived a terrifying assault. "Someone, please help! He tried to take my phone. He threatened me. I think he has a weapon." Gasps rippled audibly through the rapidly gathering crowd. Strangers drew nearer, forming an increasingly tight circle around Marquis and Claire. Marquis spun slowly in place, panic rising like bile in his throat as he saw the multitude of cell phones pointed directly at him, capturing every second of this nightmare unfolding. "No," Marquis protested weakly, his voice shaking. I didn't do anything. She took my phone. She pushed me first." But Claire's hysterical accusations drowned out his quiet pleas. She fell dramatically to her knees on the sidewalk, sobbing loudly, her shoulders shaking violently with each staged breath. "He said he'd hurt me," she cried out, voice raw with well-practiced distress. "He's dangerous. I saw him watching the children earlier. Oh my God, someone stop him, please!" Marquis felt the suffocating weight of the gathered stares, his heart hammering frantically against his ribs. No one stepped forward to defend him, though a few faces seemed conflicted, torn between suspicion and doubt. He took a cautious step backward, eyes wide and glassy with genuine fear. He wanted desperately to disappear beneath the shade of the willow, to vanish from sight entirely and escape the rising storm around him. A young man holding a camera phone murmured quietly to his companion, his voice audible enough to pierce Marquis's growing dread. "Do you think he's armed? Should we step in?" Someone else responded uncertainly. "I don't know. She seems pretty sure. Maybe it's best we stay back. Cops are already coming." Marquis's shoulders slumped, feeling completely alone despite the thickening crowd. He glanced desperately toward the edges of the park, searching for any sign of his mother's familiar figure, praying silently that she would appear and put an end to this nightmare. But Claire's performance was relentless. "I thought he was going to kill me," she wailed, her voice trembling convincingly. She pointed again at Marquise with a shaking finger, her eyes wide with exaggerated terror. "Check his pockets. He could have a knife. He was hiding there, watching, waiting for a target. He could have grabbed someone's kid." Each accusation stabbed Marquise deeper than Claire's nails ever could, the cruel words tearing at something more fragile and vulnerable within him. His throat tightened painfully, the stinging burn of tears threatening to spill down his cheeks. He felt the weight of injustice pressing down on him like a crushing tide. In the distance, a faint but growing sound pierced through the chaos, the unmistakable wail of sirens approaching rapidly. Marquise's breath hitched sharply, his pulse quickening yet again. He knew the situation was spiraling further out of his control. He clenched his fists, fighting to steady his trembling legs beneath him, bracing himself as the wailing grew louder. Claire's cries continued unabated, echoing with calculated intensity. Marquise could only stand, helpless beneath the unforgiving glare of dozens of strangers recording him. Their eyes, filled with doubt and suspicion, seemed to accuse him without ever speaking a single word. As the first glimpse of flashing lights became visible through the trees, Marquis felt trapped, lost beneath the sprawling branches of the willow tree, once his sanctuary, now the silent witness to the terrifying injustice unfolding before his eyes. The shrill wail of police sirens sliced through the murmuring crowd, bringing an immediate silence as everyone turned toward the flashing lights, rapidly approaching the edge of the park. Marquis stood frozen beneath the willow, heart hammering against his ribs, his legs trembling slightly as fear surged through him. The broken pieces of his phone lay scattered at his feet, a harsh reminder of his vulnerability. The ache in his arm from Claire's sharp fingernails felt raw beneath his sleeve. Two officers quickly exited the patrol car, stepping purposefully onto the grassy park. Officer Briggs moved first, his stride authoritative and aggressive, immediately scanning the scene with suspicion hardening his features. His eyes landed squarely on Marquis, narrowing immediately in judgment. Behind him, Officer Langston followed more slowly, his movements cautious, his eyes darting around the scene with careful consideration. Something in his gaze lingered uncertainly, as if sensing the truth that lay hidden beneath the unfolding chaos. Briggs advanced toward Marquis without hesitation, his hand resting threateningly on the grip of his sidearm. "Stay exactly where you are," he barked harshly, his voice echoing sharply through the still air. Marquis flinched, lifting both hands reflexively, palms open, a desperate gesture to show his innocence. "Officer," Marquis pleaded, his voice shaking, "I didn't do anything. I swear she attacked me first. She broke my phone and—" "Quiet!" Briggs snapped, cutting Marquis off coldly, dismissing his words with a sharp wave of his hand. Briggs turned briefly toward Claire, whose sobbing intensified dramatically as soon as she saw the officers approaching. "He was watching the children," Claire cried, voice rising hysterically as she pointed accusingly toward Marquis again. "I asked him what he was doing here, and he went crazy. He tried to grab my phone. He scratched me. I thought he was going to hurt me." Langston's eyes narrowed as he listened to Claire's frantic accusations. He hesitated slightly, shifting his weight, as though some instinct told him to pause, to listen more closely. But Briggs gave him a stern glance, silently reinforcing his authority, forcing Langston back into compliance. Still, Langston's eyes held an undeniable discomfort, reflecting a nagging doubt about the narrative unfolding before him. "You got anything dangerous on you, kid?" Briggs demanded sharply, ignoring Marquise's trembling attempt to speak. "Weapons? Drugs?" "No, sir," Marquise insisted, his voice cracking with panic. "Please, she's lying. Please, listen to me. Turn around and keep your hands where I can see them," Briggs ordered firmly, reaching for Marquise as if to frisk him aggressively. Marquise recoiled instinctively, the sudden movement making Briggs stiffen visibly, his posture becoming even more hostile. "I told you not to move!" Briggs shouted angrily, his hand tightening further on his weapon. Marquis froze immediately, fear locking his joints in place, his breath shallow and frantic. The crowd around them murmured anxiously, phones still raised, capturing every second of the growing tension. Unnoticed by anyone else, Tasha Ramirez stood quietly beneath the shade of another tree nearby, her phone positioned discreetly behind the sleeve of her jacket. Her breath was steady, her hands calm as she captured each detail, her eyes sharply tracking Claire's movements. Suddenly, Tasha's camera caught something subtle but unmistakable. Claire's eyes flickered toward a tall, white man standing near the crowd's edge, giving him a quick, almost imperceptible nod. The man nodded back, a brief, reassuring gesture clearly visible on Tasha's hidden camera. Tasha's lips pressed tightly together, her fingers tightening around her phone as she realized what was unfolding before her. This was no random confrontation. It was orchestrated, calculated. Claire was deliberately provoking Marquis, confident that the arrival of the police would escalate the situation in her favor. Back near the willow, Marquis's voice grew quieter, increasingly lost beneath Claire's exaggerated cries and Briggs's harsh accusations. "I didn't touch her," Marquis whispered desperately, tears of frustration and fear burning behind his eyes. "I'm just waiting for my mom. I was just reading." "Just reading?" Briggs scoffed dismissively, shaking his head with exaggerated disbelief. "Is that what they call it now? Empty your pockets now!" Langston shifted his weight again, clearly uncomfortable, his jaw tight. "Briggs," he finally ventured softly, "maybe we should slow down. He's just a kid. He doesn't seem—" Briggs shot him a sharp glare, cutting him off instantly. "I know what I'm doing," he snapped angrily. Langston fell silent again, eyes dropping briefly toward the ground in reluctant compliance. Claire continued sobbing theatrically, glancing occasionally at her silent accomplice, her confidence swelling as Briggs took charge. Marquise, now trembling uncontrollably, stood helpless and exposed, isolated by suspicion and surrounded by hostile faces and camera lenses trained steadily upon him. The tension in the park tightened unbearably, hovering dangerously close to breaking point. Briggs's hand remained poised aggressively near his weapon. Claire's voice rose in another wave of hysterics, and Langston's silence stretched out painfully. Marquise, utterly alone amidst the chaos, felt himself drowning in helplessness, his hope dwindling rapidly beneath the willow's silent branches. All he could do was pray for someone to help, for someone to finally see the truth beneath Claire's carefully constructed lies. Marquise's breath caught in his throat, choking on fear, his heartbeat roaring louder than the murmurs and whispers of the surrounding crowd. Officer Briggs stepped closer, his movements sharp and aggressive, eyes darkened by suspicion and unchecked prejudice. The officer's gloved hand lingered threateningly close to the grip of his weapon, the polished metal gleaming ominously beneath the stark afternoon sunlight. "You heard me!" Briggs snapped impatiently, voice reverberating with authority as he took another intimidating step toward Marquise. "Empty your pockets, right now!" Marquise swallowed hard, eyes wide with panic, raising his trembling hands even higher. "I don't have anything," he pleaded desperately, his voice shaking under the crushing weight of fear. "Please, you have to listen to me. I didn't do anything wrong." The young boy's desperate appeals were quickly drowned out by Claire Whitmore's renewed theatrics. Claire pointed toward Marquis again, her eyes wide with performative panic, voice rising sharply above the uneasy crowd. "He's lying!" she shrieked dramatically, her words slicing through the tension. "He said he had something on him. I saw him reach into his pocket earlier. He's dangerous. He has a weapon." Murmurs intensified around the perimeter of the growing circle of onlookers. People's expressions ranged from horror to hesitant skepticism, yet still no one intervened. Phones continued filming from every angle, capturing the harrowing moment, each camera's lens silently complicit in the unfolding injustice. Briggs's gaze hardened further at Claire's renewed accusations, his posture growing visibly stiffer, fingers tightening almost imperceptibly around the grip of his firearm. "Kid, don't make this any harder," Briggs warned coldly, his tone edged with impatience and menace. "You're only making things worse for yourself." Marquise felt tears threaten to spill from his eyes, the burning humiliation and terror overwhelming him. He shook his head frantically, his words breaking into frightened fragments. "No, sir. Please, I swear. I didn't threaten her. She attacked me." Briggs scoffed derisively, clearly unmoved, stepping forward abruptly, his gloved hand now reaching out aggressively toward Marquis. "Enough games!" Briggs snarled harshly, preparing to forcibly grab Marquise's arm. "Hands behind your back! Right now!" At Briggs's sudden aggressive advance, the crowd gasped audibly, recoiling instinctively, their camera phones still silently recording every detail. Claire clasped her hands tightly together in front of her chest, feigning a look of terrified relief as Briggs moved decisively to detain the boy. Officer Langston stood slightly behind, his brow furrowed deeply, clearly torn and conflicted, yet still silent and unmoving. His jaw tightened, his posture tense with suppressed doubts. Langston's eyes flickered between Briggs's aggressive actions and Marquise's desperate expression, silently recognizing the wrongness unfolding before him. Yet the words remained stuck behind the cautious discipline ingrained from years in uniform. Marquise flinched sharply backward, instinctively trying to avoid Briggs's harsh grasp, his heart now hammering wildly against his ribs. "Please," Marquise begged hoarsely, his voice cracking helplessly. "You're making a mistake. I'm not armed. Please don't hurt me." But Briggs's hand moved forward relentlessly, driven by suspicion and unchecked bias. The world seemed to slow around Marquis, each passing second feeling impossibly long as he watched the officer's gloved fingers close in toward him, the aggressive stance signaling the terrifying inevitability of violence. Claire's eyes flashed briefly toward her accomplice in the crowd, her expression shifting momentarily to a subtle smirk of satisfaction, just long enough to be captured clearly by Tasha Ramirez's hidden camera. Tasha held her breath, still recording carefully, fully aware now that she possessed critical evidence that could expose the sinister plot hidden beneath Claire's carefully staged drama. Briggs was inches from seizing Marquise's wrist, the tension in the air stretched so tightly it threatened to snap, when suddenly the deep growl of an engine reverberated sharply through the park. Tires squealed loudly against asphalt, jerking every head in the direction of the street. A sleek black SUV swung aggressively up onto the curb near the park entrance, coming to a sudden, commanding stop that instantly drew the attention of everyone present. For a split second, an uneasy silence engulfed the entire crowd. Curiosity mingled heavily with renewed tension. Briggs paused briefly, glancing sharply toward the vehicle, his hand frozen mid-motion, mere inches from Marquise's trembling wrist. Langston's posture relaxed fractionally, his eyes betraying cautious hope that relief might be imminent. The SUV's driver's side door swung open forcefully, and a woman stepped swiftly and decisively onto the sidewalk, her dark eyes blazing with fierce intensity. Her heels clicked powerfully against the concrete as she moved quickly, striding confidently toward the gathering beneath the willow. Her gaze scanned the crowd rapidly, narrowing sharply when her eyes settled firmly upon Marquis. Marquis felt a rush of relief flood his body, his knees nearly buckling beneath him as he recognized the familiar and fiercely protective face approaching rapidly. His chest heaved with the first deep breath he'd managed in minutes, hope instantly replacing dread, his voice breaking into a relieved whisper. "Mom." The woman's presence was commanding and immediate, her eyes scanning every face present as she advanced with deliberate speed toward her son. Her expression shifted from initial concern to sudden, focused determination. recognizing instantly the perilous and unjust situation surrounding Marquis. Briggs hesitated uncertainly, his confidence wavering slightly as he took in the woman's authoritative approach. Claire's eyes widened briefly in startled uncertainty, her exaggerated sobs faltering momentarily, sensing a shift in the narrative she had so carefully constructed. Marquise's mother reached the circle swiftly, her gaze sharp as she immediately took control of the moment. Her voice rang out, strong and unwavering, breaking decisively through the confusion and fear, instantly compelling attention and obedience from the gathered crowd. "Someone explain to me immediately," she demanded sharply, her voice calm yet filled with authority. "Exactly what is going on here, and why you have your hand on my son." Her question echoed powerfully through the stillness, forcing Briggs to awkwardly retract his hand, the aggression quickly replaced by sudden uncertainty. Langston stepped forward slightly, eyes lowered respectfully, clearly relieved yet apprehensive. Claire, momentarily caught off guard, frantically resumed her tearful performance, though its effect had noticeably diminished beneath the commanding presence of Marquise's mother. The crowd watched eagerly, sensing an important shift was underway. Marquis, heart still pounding rapidly, felt an overwhelming wave of relief wash through him, his fear now tempered by renewed hope and growing strength. His mother's arrival had halted the injustice just in time, but the confrontation was far from finished. The truth still needed to be told. The powerful silence lingered for just an instant, suspended heavily in the air, as Denise Jefferson, mayor of the city, stepped firmly into the center of the tense circle. Her sharp gaze swept immediately to Marquis, carefully assessing her son's frightened face and trembling hands, before moving swiftly toward Officer Briggs, her eyes blazing with controlled fury. "What exactly is happening here, officer?" she asked, her voice composed, yet carrying a steely resolve that demanded immediate respect. Her presence, authoritative and poised, instantly shifted the energy within the crowd, eyes now fixed on her commanding figure. Briggs stiffened visibly, his expression rapidly cycling through surprise, uncertainty, and finally a defensive indignation. He squared his shoulders defiantly, mustering whatever authority remained within him. "Ma'am, we received a report about a potential threat." "A threat?" Denise interjected sharply, stepping forward, placing herself protectively between Briggs and Marquis. "My son was quietly reading under a tree. What possible threat could he pose?" Briggs cleared his throat loudly, refusing to concede. "Ma'am, this woman clearly reported an attempted assault. She said your son threatened her, possibly armed. He refused to comply." "Refused?" Denise cut in sharply, narrowing her eyes, voice resonating powerfully enough to silence Briggs mid-sentence. "Did he pose any visible danger to you or anyone else here? Was he actually armed?" Briggs faltered briefly, glancing around as if searching for support from the watching crowd, but found only silent, wary stares. "Well, we don't know yet," he stammered. "He seemed suspicious. He wouldn't cooperate. He's a 13-year-old child," Denise retorted firmly, her voice clear enough for everyone gathered to hear. "Yet you treated him as if he were already guilty. Explain to me exactly why you immediately believed an unsubstantiated claim without question." Briggs's face reddened beneath the scrutiny, anger flashing across his features. "With all due respect, ma'am, I acted according to procedure." "Procedure?" Denise snapped, anger flaring visibly now. "You mean profiling? Targeting a scared child based purely on someone else's accusations? You approached him aggressively, ready to draw your weapon on a child with a book in his hand." Briggs sputtered angrily, visibly flustered, attempting to justify his behavior. "Ma'am, I was doing my job." "Your job is to protect every citizen equally," Denise stated coldly, her eyes intense with unwavering authority. "Your actions here today suggest otherwise." Officer Langston shifted his weight uncomfortably, his eyes dropping to the ground, his face burning with evident shame. He clearly understood Denise's accusations were valid, He stepped forward slightly, voice soft and hesitant. "Mayor Jefferson, I had doubts myself," he admitted quietly. "I realize we escalated things prematurely." Denise turned sharply toward Langston, her expression softening slightly but still firmly assertive. "Then why didn't you speak up earlier, Officer Langston? Your silence allowed this situation to escalate dangerously." Langston swallowed hard, nodding solemnly, unable to meet her eyes. "You're right, Mayor Jefferson. I should have intervened. I failed you. And your son." Claire Whitmore, realizing her control of the narrative was slipping, stepped forward dramatically, her voice again loud, desperate to regain sympathy. "Mayor Jefferson, please, I was terrified. He tried to attack me. I'm the victim here. He was lurking around the children." Denise turned to Claire with a cold, steady gaze, cutting her off instantly with the sharp clarity of her voice. "Ms. Whitmore, can you explain exactly how my son, seated quietly beneath a willow tree, reading a book, posed a threat to you or any child?" Claire hesitated briefly, her voice faltering under Denise's unwavering scrutiny. I thought he was scouting. He was watching kids, acting suspicious." "Suspicious?" Denise echoed sharply, stepping even closer, pinning Claire under a merciless gaze. "Did he approach anyone? Speak threateningly to anyone? Or did you approach him first?" Claire stammered, the crowd's murmurs intensifying as Denise pressed firmly forward. "I was just concerned." "So concerned," Denise interrupted fiercely, "that you felt justified grabbing his phone, shattering it, and physically attacking him?" I was afraid," Claire stuttered defensively, eyes darting desperately, seeking sympathetic faces within the crowd, but finding only suspicion and doubt. "He made sudden movements. I thought he had a weapon." "Sudden movements?" Denise countered, her voice icy. "My son's only sudden movement was trying to retrieve the phone you violently snatched and broke. If anyone was violent, Ms. Whitmore, it was clearly you." Denise turned toward the crowd, her voice raising powerfully, addressing everyone who stood watching intently. "Do you all see clearly what just happened here? A child quietly reading, falsely accused and violently assaulted, nearly arrested simply for existing in a public park?" Silence followed her words, punctuated only by the nervous shifting of feet, shame and discomfort palpable among the gathered witnesses. Camera phones still pointed steadily toward Denise, capturing her powerful, righteous indignation, instantly reframing the narrative Claire had meticulously fabricated. Tasha Ramirez moved subtly forward from the edges of the crowd, lifting her phone higher, ensuring it clearly captured Claire's increasingly panicked expression. Tasha's eyes glittered with determination, aware of the significance of the footage she possessed, the hidden truth about Claire's deception. Denise turned back to Briggs, her voice unwavering. "Officer, you need to reconsider your definition of procedure immediately. This situation demands a thorough investigation, not into my son's actions, but yours." Briggs stood speechless, cheeks flushed in angry embarrassment, eyes darkened by simmering resentment but ultimately defeated by Denise's undeniable authority. He took a step backward, visibly retreating under the heavy weight of her accusations. Langston, relieved yet still ashamed, nodded slowly, accepting responsibility. "We'll file a full report, Mayor Jefferson. I promise you, this will be properly addressed." Denise's gaze softened just slightly, appreciating Langston's sincerity. "See that it is, Officer Langston." And quickly, she turned finally to Marquise, gently placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder, comforting him instantly with the strength of her presence. Marquise felt overwhelming relief flood his heart, tears of exhaustion and gratitude burning behind his eyes. Denise raised her head, her voice loud and firm, resonating with power and conviction. "This community must understand clearly today. Injustice will never be tolerated, especially when directed toward our children. Every single one of us must commit to accountability." As Denise's words hung powerfully in the silence, Claire visibly shrank back. Defeated, Officer Briggs stood motionless, jaw clenched tightly. The narrative had irrevocably shifted. The crowd now fully saw the truth beneath the willow's sheltering branches. The crowd remained still, utterly captivated by Denise Jefferson's firm declaration, every eye trained on her with a mixture of admiration, respect, and relief. A tangible shift had occurred. Authority had changed hands. Clarity had replaced confusion, and justice had begun to reclaim the narrative. Yet, beneath the powerful silence that followed Denise's words, tension lingered. Questions still hovered unanswered in the air. Shadows of uncertainty still clouded faces, awaiting a definitive revelation. From the edge of the gathered crowd, Tasha Ramirez felt her heart racing. Her fingers tightened around her phone, the screen warm from prolonged filming. She knew she held crucial evidence, a truth powerful enough to end Claire Whitmore's manipulation once and for all. Taking a deep breath, Tasha stepped resolutely forward, lifting her voice clearly above the murmuring onlookers. "Mayor Jefferson?" Tasha called out firmly, her voice drawing immediate attention as the crowd's heads turned curiously in her direction. Denise turned swiftly, eyebrows lifting in surprise but quickly composing herself, her gaze steady and expectant. "Yes?" Denise prompted gently, sensing the gravity behind Tasha's deliberate approach. "My name is Tasha Ramirez," she said clearly, stepping forward, steadying herself under the focused gaze of dozens of onlookers and cameras. "I was standing just over there. I saw what really happened. I filmed everything." An immediate hush swept over the crowd, all eyes widening, phones turning toward her, capturing every word. Claire visibly stiffened, her confident facade rapidly dissolving into barely hidden panic, eyes darting frantically toward her accomplice, whose face suddenly paled noticeably. Tasha raised her phone confidently, turning it outward for Denise and the crowd to see clearly. "This footage proves Marquis is innocent," she declared calmly, firmly holding everyone's attention. "It also proves that this woman deliberately provoked and attacked him, then lied to officers." Gasps rippled audibly across the gathering. Denise took a step closer, nodding encouragingly to Tasha, her expression attentive yet composed. "Please, show us clearly." Tasha pressed play, turning up the volume so the gathered crowd could easily hear. On the small screen, every moment of Claire's calculated manipulation unfolded vividly. Her cautious glance toward her accomplice, the subtle nod exchanged between them, the staged panic in her performance. The footage revealed Claire's carefully choreographed aggression, grabbing Marquise's phone, shoving him forcefully, attacking first, all undeniable, captured clearly. Claire's face turned ashen, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly, her eyes desperate, looking frantically around the circle of judgmental stares, searching for any shred of fading sympathy. Her accomplice subtly retreated into the shadows of the crowd, quietly slipping away, leaving Claire entirely isolated and exposed. Denise's eyes narrowed sharply, her voice icy as she addressed Claire directly. "Ms. Whitmore, would you care to explain this? This looks rather deliberate to me." Claire stumbled back slightly, her bravado entirely vanished, voice trembling. "That's not what... It's taken out of context." "Out of context?" Denise interrupted coldly. "This footage is crystal clear. Your intent was obvious. You orchestrated this to make an innocent child look dangerous. Why?" Claire shook her head frantically, now visibly shaking, her words dissolving into desperate fragments. "I was trying. I thought it was just you targeted my son, deliberately endangered him, and wasted police resources, Ms. Whitmore," Denise stated with unwavering authority, her voice resonating clearly through the stunned silence. "You'll answer for this, I promise you." Officer Langston stepped forward hesitantly, his jaw tight, shame etched clearly across his face. He swallowed hard, his voice heavy with guilt, as he finally spoke out. "Mayor Jefferson, I need to say something. Officer Briggs, his behavior today..." It was excessive. I've had concerns about his aggressive approach for some time now. It's become a pattern. I regret not intervening sooner. I failed Marcus, and I failed you." Langston's words hung solemnly in the air, genuine remorse apparent in his eyes. The crowd murmured softly, shocked yet grateful at his candid admission. Briggs's face flushed a deep, angry red, turning sharply toward Langston, betrayal flashing fiercely across his features. But under Denise's firm stare, Briggs fell silent, eyes lowered angrily to the ground. Denise regarded Langston thoughtfully for a moment, recognizing the courage and sincerity behind his admission. "Thank you, Officer Langston. Your honesty now is crucial. Your willingness to acknowledge mistakes will help ensure meaningful accountability." Langston nodded quietly, accepting the weight of his responsibility, visibly relieved despite the severity of the moment. Denise turned again toward the crowd, speaking loudly and deliberately, her voice resonating powerfully. "We've witnessed something deeply troubling today, a deliberate attempt to weaponize bias and fear against an innocent child. This cannot and will not go unaddressed. Justice demands immediate accountability." Claire stood silently, visibly crumbling under Denise's resolute authority and the community's judgmental stare. Tasha lowered her phone gently, releasing a slow, relieved breath, feeling vindicated for the risks she'd taken. Marquis moved slightly closer to his mother, shoulders finally relaxing, his fear easing beneath her protective strength. Denise's voice rose again, firm and unwavering, addressing the gathered community once more. "Today must mark a turning point, one that reaffirms justice, accountability, and the safety of every child, no matter who they are or what they look like. And make no mistake, anyone who tries to harm the innocent with false accusations will face swift consequences." A murmur of approval rippled across the crowd, nodding heads reflecting newfound determination. Phones continued capturing the powerful moment, broadcasting Denise's passionate, authoritative stance instantly across the community and beyond. Marquis looked up into his mother's face, pride and gratitude shining clearly in his eyes. Denise gently placed her hand reassuringly on his shoulder once more, offering quiet strength. Tasha stepped back slightly, blending again into the gathered crowd, her heart finally easing as justice began reclaiming the narrative. Langston stood quietly, absorbing the weight of his earlier silence, determined never again to stand aside in the face of injustice. And beneath the gentle branches of the willow tree, truth finally overshadowed lies. Dignity reclaimed its rightful place, and the path toward accountability was firmly set in motion. In the aftermath of Tasha's decisive revelation, the atmosphere in the park shifted dramatically. What had begun as uneasy curiosity quickly transformed into outright condemnation. The previously uncertain crowd now cast harsh, judgmental stares toward Claire Whitmore, who stood frozen in place, eyes wide with desperation and disbelief. Her confidence, once an intimidating force, now dissolved beneath the weight of undeniable truth. Soft murmurs swelled into angry whispers, voices blending into a single accusatory chorus aimed squarely at Claire. "How could she do that?" someone hissed loudly. "He's just a child." Another voice, indignant and trembling with fury, rose sharply. "She was trying to set him up. It was all planned." Claire, visibly shaken, shrank backward, suddenly stripped of all bravado, desperate eyes searching fruitlessly for a sympathetic face among the once supportive bystanders. Finding none, her panicked gaze darted toward Officer Briggs, silently begging for support. But Briggs was in no position to offer refuge, his own anger and resentment barely concealed beneath a tense, reddened expression. The crowd's focus soon pivoted sharply toward Briggs himself. His aggressive behavior was now under full scrutiny. Tasha's footage had revealed not only Claire's malicious deception, but also the officer's reckless aggression, now clearly seen as dangerous and unwarranted. Briggs clenched his jaw stubbornly, eyes dark with suppressed fury, trapped by his own actions, powerless to deflect the community's building anger. "You should be ashamed," a woman called out, her voice ringing with powerful emotion. "You were ready to arrest an innocent child. What kind of officer behaves like that?" Briggs recoiled visibly, stepping back defensively, hands raised in reluctant surrender. His attempts to argue or justify his actions dissolved under the weight of collective outrage. Officer Langston stood silently nearby, gaze lowered, shoulders heavy with guilt, feeling the community's justified anger, but relieved that the truth had finally emerged. Denise Jefferson drew Marquis gently toward her, embracing him firmly in a protective hold. Marquis, finally safe and secure, exhaled deeply into his mother's shoulder, the built-up tension leaving his small frame with a shuddering breath. Denise softly stroked his back reassuringly, her voice quiet yet unwavering with fierce determination. "You're safe now, Marquise," she whispered gently into his ear, offering comfort. "I promise you, I won't let anything like this ever happen again." Marquis nodded silently, allowing himself to relax at last. Comforted by the power and strength of his mother's presence, he felt relief wash over him, replacing the fear and helplessness that had gripped him earlier. Denise slowly released Marquis, standing tall once more and turning back toward the gathered community. Her voice powerful, resolute, and carrying an undeniable authority. "Let me be clear," she stated firmly, each word punctuated with conviction. "Today's events have revealed deeply troubling misconduct. Misconduct rooted in bias and prejudice. Misconduct that we will address swiftly and publicly. As your mayor, I promise a full, transparent investigation. Every individual responsible will be held fully accountable." Murmurs of approval rose again from the crowd, nodding heads and determined expressions reflecting unanimous support. Phones continued to capture her promise, amplifying the urgency of Denise's words throughout the city. Claire, visibly trembling, finally spoke again, her voice weak and unsteady as she attempted a final desperate defense. "Mayor Jefferson, I didn't mean. I thought," but Denise raised her hand sharply, cutting Claire off immediately, her voice firm and dismissive. "Save your explanations for investigators, Ms. Whitmore. Your actions speak clearly enough. We will ensure justice is done, not only for Marquis, but for anyone else who may have suffered because of people like you." Claire's shoulders slumped in defeat, the full weight of her imminent accountability pressing down heavily upon her. She no longer protested, only stared numbly at the ground beneath her feet. As realization fully settled in, her deception was irreversibly exposed. Denise turned again toward Officer Briggs, her gaze cold, piercing, and unwavering. "As for you, Officer Briggs, your behavior today is inexcusable. Until this investigation concludes, I strongly urge your department to consider appropriate action immediately." Briggs opened his mouth briefly, attempting another futile protest, but Denise's authority silenced him instantly, leaving him bitterly, helplessly subdued. Langston finally met Denise's eyes, nodding respectfully in solemn acknowledgement. "We will cooperate fully, Mayor Jefferson," he assured quietly. "I promise you." Denise returned Langston's nod appreciatively, recognizing genuine remorse and integrity behind his words. Then, addressing the community one final time, her voice grew steady with renewed determination. "Today must be a turning point for us," she declared powerfully. "We will face these uncomfortable truths honestly. Our city deserves better. Our children deserve safety and dignity. Together, we will ensure that this injustice never happens again." A loud cheer erupted spontaneously from the crowd. Applause mingled with determined voices affirming Denise's strong declaration. He smiled faintly, still shaken but deeply comforted by his mother's unwavering strength. Yet, amid the palpable relief and newfound unity, Denise remained unaware of something else. This park incident had already spread far beyond its initial boundaries. Unknown to everyone gathered, Tasha Ramirez's original footage, along with several other bystanders' recordings, had already begun trending online, rapidly shared across social media platforms. The city's outrage was about to spiral dramatically, transforming Marquise's experience from a single moment of injustice into a flashpoint, igniting widespread demands for systemic reform. As Denise confidently took Marquise's hand and began leading him gently toward their waiting SUV, she remained unaware of how swiftly this moment would evolve. Far beyond the park, beyond Claire Whitmore, and even beyond Officer Briggs himself, this incident, captured in vivid detail, had already ignited a broader, more profound reckoning. The mayor had set something powerful into motion, something that would transform the city itself. Within hours, the videos exploded across social media, spreading rapidly through thousands of shares and angry comments. Each clip revealed a new angle, offering further proof of the disturbing incident beneath the willow tree. Marquis Jefferson's fear, Claire Whitmore's deception, Officer Briggs's harsh aggression, and Denise Jefferson's powerful intervention. Online forums, news channels, and community pages erupted in a fierce debate, swiftly transforming Marquise's private ordeal into a city-wide reckoning. Claire Whitmore's identity didn't remain hidden for long. Internet sleuths quickly tracked down her social media profiles, workplace, and personal history. Images from her videos, clear and damning, circulated with ruthless efficiency. Angry citizens flooded Claire's employer, a prominent real estate firm, with emails and phone calls demanding accountability, denouncing her racist behavior, and threatening boycotts if action wasn't taken immediately. Under the mounting pressure, Claire's employer released a swift, unequivocal public statement. They condemned her actions, announcing her immediate termination, and distanced themselves fully from her behavior. Overnight, Claire's reputation dissolved completely, her professional achievements overshadowed by her exposed cruelty and deceit. Across the city, media outlets and commentators seized the incident as a symbol of broader systemic failures. Marquise's quiet, vulnerable expression, captured clearly in the footage, became emblematic of deeper racial biases plaguing the community. His story ignited passionate public discourse, and calls for immediate police reform surged. Denise Jefferson stood firmly at the epicenter, praised by many for her swift, unwavering stance against injustice, yet relentlessly targeted by critics eager to exploit the incident politically. Opponents accused her administration of fostering division, blaming her for increased scrutiny of police conduct. Still, Denise remained resolute, confidently addressing every media outlet, promising transparency, accountability, and meaningful change. But Claire, feeling cornered, isolated, and desperate, refused to quietly accept the destruction of her reputation and career. After days of being vilified in public, she shifted into an aggressive counteroffensive, filing a dramatic defamation lawsuit directly against Denise Jefferson. Claire boldly claimed Mayor Jefferson abused her power and position, alleging that the mayor's public condemnation amounted to targeted harassment and irreparable harm to her life and career. In a tearful, carefully orchestrated press conference held in front of the courthouse, Claire painted herself as the victim, claiming she'd been misunderstood and unfairly vilified by the mayor's political agenda. "I made a mistake," Claire sobbed dramatically, her voice trembling theatrically as cameras flashed continuously around her. "But does that justify destroying my life? Mayor Jefferson used her power to ruin me. She deliberately portrayed me as a racist to score political points. All I wanted was to protect our children, and now look what they've done to me." The spectacle drew instant attention, polarizing public opinion even further. Claire's carefully performed vulnerability resonated with a small but vocal group who began questioning whether she'd been excessively punished. Commentators debated fiercely on television panels, fueling the controversy further, deepening divisions throughout the city. Back home, Marquise watched helplessly as his face and name were repeatedly broadcast, his personal trauma dissected publicly. The constant media attention and contentious debates deeply unsettled him, reopening emotional wounds still fresh from his frightening experience in the park. Denise did her best to shield him, offering comfort and reassurance, but both knew the ordeal was far from over. Despite Denise's best efforts, Claire's lawsuit intensified the political storm. Pressure mounted quickly on Denise's office, fueled by rival politicians seeking opportunities to exploit the turmoil. Critics publicly accused the mayor of misusing her influence to manipulate public outrage for political advantage, further complicating her already difficult fight for justice. But while Claire's public theatrics initially gained sympathetic attention, her lawsuit ignited further determination among Denise's supporters. Tasha Ramirez stepped forward again publicly, sharing additional footage and speaking confidently to the press, challenging Claire's narrative directly. Claire Whitmore knew exactly what she was doing. Tasha asserted firmly during an interview broadcast citywide, this wasn't just an innocent mistake. It was planned, intentional, and dangerous. Marquise Jefferson deserved justice, and the mayor did exactly the right thing by speaking out. Don't let Claire fool you. Officer Langston also spoke publicly, admitting his own regret and guilt for not intervening sooner, further dismantling Claire's victim narrative. Langston's honest admissions resonated deeply, inspiring widespread support for Denise's firm stance on reform. Yet, amid escalating controversy, Denise privately recognized the growing complexity of the situation. Claire's desperate lawsuit, while transparently manipulative, posed genuine risks to Denise's credibility, threatening to derail the broader reforms she passionately sought. Denise knew this fight had moved well beyond a personal attack. It had become a battle for the soul of her community, a decisive moment that demanded both strength and strategy. Marquise, sensing his mother's tension, reached for her hand one quiet evening at home, his voice soft but steady. "Mom, are you okay?" Denise smiled gently, squeezing his hand reassuringly. "I'm fine, sweetheart. It's just grown more complicated than I expected." He met her eyes seriously, determination clear in his youthful gaze. "I want to help. It's not fair they're blaming you. You stood up for me, and everyone else who might be treated unfairly. People need to understand what really happened." Denise felt a surge of pride at Marquise's bravery. She nodded slowly, her voice firm yet gentle. "They will understand. We won't back down, Marquise. The truth always comes out. We'll get through this, together." Meanwhile, as public pressure continued mounting, City Hall buzzed with anticipation. Reporters swarmed the courthouse, awaiting official responses. Denise prepared meticulously with her legal team, determined to expose Claire's tactics once and for all, fully committed to defending not only her reputation, but also the broader principle at stake: justice itself. Yet even Denise was unaware of the powerful revelation soon to come. New evidence gathered quietly, set to decisively dismantle Claire's entire lawsuit and publicly expose her manipulation even further. This evidence would shatter Claire's false narrative once and for all, proving conclusively that the real threat to the community wasn't Marquise or Denise. It was Claire herself. Officer Langston sat alone in the dimly lit office at the precinct long after his shift ended, the soft glow from his computer screen casting weary shadows beneath his eyes. The station was quiet now, filled only with the hum of air conditioning and the distant clinking of keys as he delved deeper into Officer Briggs's internal records, driven by nagging doubt and quiet determination. Something about Briggs's explosive reaction that day had unsettled him deeply, awakening an instinct he could no longer ignore. As Langston clicked through the files, a troubling pattern quickly emerged. Hidden beneath mundane disciplinary reports and internal notes were quiet allegations repeatedly filed away without consequence. Langston's heart sank deeper with each entry. Multiple complaints from minority residents accusing Briggs of excessive force, unprovoked hostility during routine interactions, and racial profiling. Each complaint seemingly dismissed or buried beneath procedural red tape. One report, buried within the archives, detailed an incident involving a young Hispanic man, just 16 years old at the time, named Antonio Ramirez. Langston's breath quickened as he read carefully, recognizing the significance immediately. The report accused Briggs of aggressively detaining Antonio without clear cause, injuring him severely enough to require medical attention. Yet, despite evidence clearly pointing toward Briggs's wrongdoing, the case was inexplicably closed, categorized vaguely as insufficient evidence. Antonio Ramirez, the surname, hit Langston like a jolt of electricity. He quickly remembered Tasha Ramirez from the park, the young woman who had bravely stepped forward, holding critical evidence that exposed Claire Whitmore. Could this be the reason Tasha had involved herself so passionately? Langston took careful notes, feeling both sadness and anger rising in his chest. Briggs had been allowed to continue unchecked, emboldened by departmental silence and inaction. Langston leaned back heavily in his chair, suddenly overwhelmed by the stark reality of his complicity through silence. His own hesitation had allowed Briggs's misconduct to persist, putting countless others at risk, including Marcus Jefferson, whose innocent face now haunted him constantly. Meanwhile, in a quiet coffee shop across town, Tasha Ramirez sat nervously across from Denise Jefferson, her hands wrapped tightly around a steaming cup of coffee. Her gaze was intense yet vulnerable, the bustling noise of the cafe fading into the background as she finally revealed the deeper personal motivation behind her courageous actions. "My brother Antonio," Tasha began softly, her voice carefully controlled yet heavy with emotion. "He was targeted by Officer Briggs last year. Antonio was just a kid, quiet, smart, just like Marquis. Briggs stopped him for no reason, accused him of being a gang member, roughed him up badly, and the department just covered it up. They buried everything." Denise's face softened immediately, recognizing the profound personal anguish behind Tasha's determined eyes. "Tasha, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. That must have been so painful for your family." Tasha nodded quietly, eyes glistening briefly with tears. She quickly blinked away. Seeing Marquis being targeted like that brought everything back. How scared Antonio was, how powerless we all felt. I knew this time I had to step forward. Marquis deserved better. Antonio deserved better. Denise reached gently across the table, lightly touching Tasha's hand in comfort. "Thank you for your courage, Tasha. Your bravery is exactly what this community needs right now." At home, later that evening, Denise found Marquis quietly sitting alone by the window in their living room, sketchbook closed tightly in his lap, untouched. He stared blankly outside, the shadows from passing cars flickering gently across his solemn face. Denise approached quietly, sitting softly beside him, gently placing her hand on his shoulder. "Hey," she whispered tenderly, sensing the heaviness weighing upon him. "Want to talk?" Marquis hesitated, biting his lip, eyes fixed distantly outside. "Everything feels different now," he admitted softly, voice barely audible. "I thought after the park, everything would be okay. But now everyone's talking about it, all the time, on TV, online. I hate seeing my face everywhere, people arguing over me. I just want things to go back to normal." Denise exhaled slowly, heart aching for him. "I know, Marquis. It's not fair. None of this is fair. But sometimes, unfortunately, things happen that force us to confront painful truths. Right now, people are waking up because of what happened to you. They're finally seeing what's been hidden too long. You've shown incredible strength, more than you realize." Marquise turned slowly toward her, eyes searching hers earnestly. "But what if it never stops? What if people don't change? Denise squeezed his shoulder gently, determination steadying her voice. "We will make them change. Your courage has already started something powerful. This city has needed someone like you. Someone brave enough to face injustice head-on. But you don't have to do it alone. I promise you, I will always protect you." Marquis leaned quietly into his mother's comforting embrace, closing his eyes tightly, finally allowing himself to release the weight he'd carried since the confrontation beneath the willow tree. His mother's unwavering reassurance, her strength and determination, slowly began restoring the fractured sense of safety he'd lost that day. As they sat silently, Denise's phone vibrated sharply on the table beside them. Glancing at the notification, her heart quickened. A message from Langston. Denise opened it carefully, eyes scanning swiftly, breath catching sharply. "Mayor Jefferson, I uncovered serious evidence of Officer Briggs's misconduct. Multiple buried complaints. It's worse than we realized. Ready to discuss next steps immediately." Denise set the phone down slowly, her jaw tightening with resolve. She gently kissed the top of Marquise's head, whispering softly, "We're going to fix this, Marquis, not just for you, but for everyone who's suffered because of people like Claire and Officer Briggs. This ends now." Marquise nodded quietly, absorbing the quiet strength in her words, comforted deeply by her steadfast promise. They both knew the fight was far from over, but together, united by shared determination and courage, they would confront whatever came next, no matter how difficult or painful. Yet, neither fully grasped how deep the scandal truly ran. Langston's quiet investigation had unknowingly uncovered something far more disturbing: a network of complicity, cover-ups, and systemic failure that extended well beyond Briggs, threatening to shake the city's very foundations. Denise would soon face challenges she hadn't imagined, forced to confront harsh realities that would test her courage and leadership to their limits. But tonight, beneath the quiet warmth of home, they found solace in each other's presence, drawing strength for the battle ahead. The city buzzed with relentless intensity, consumed by the public debate and controversy swirling around the park incident. Every television station, every news feed, every corner cafe echoed with heated discussions about Marquis Jefferson, Claire Whitmore, and the explosive confrontation that had ignited a powerful movement for justice. Claire's defamation lawsuit had managed briefly to sway public sympathy her way, creating uncertainty and doubt. Her tearful press conferences and carefully crafted victim narrative had prompted whispers that perhaps Mayor Denise Jefferson had been too quick to publicly condemn her, that perhaps Claire had been misunderstood, unfairly maligned. For a fleeting moment, it appeared Claire might manage to restore some shred of her ruined reputation. But that fragile sympathy was shattered overnight. It happened quietly, without fanfare at first. A video uploaded anonymously to a local community page, buried initially beneath headlines and endless arguments. Yet, within hours, the footage gained explosive traction, rapidly spreading across social media platforms, igniting a firestorm of public outrage even greater than the original videos. The clip, recorded innocently by a 9-year-old child playing nearby, offered crystal-clear audio and visuals. It showed Claire Whitmore discreetly talking to an unidentified white man, the same man Tasha Ramirez had briefly captured, signaling Claire in the park. Claire's voice carried clearly, distinct and unmistakable, as she outlined her disturbing plan. "You just stay nearby, okay?" Claire instructed quietly, eyes scanning cautiously around them. "If the boy acts confused or tries to walk away, you step in or back me up. We need him to look aggressive. If this works, we can finally make people see these kids for what they really are." The video's revelation was staggering, undeniable proof of Claire's calculated intentions, premeditated, malicious, and undeniably racist. Social media erupted with fury, and within hours, Claire's remaining support evaporated completely, replaced by unanimous condemnation. The footage quickly reached the courthouse where Claire's defamation lawsuit hearings were ongoing. Claire, seated stiffly beside her lawyer, paled visibly as the footage played dramatically in the courtroom, amplified on a large projection screen for the judge, jury, and assembled media. Her attorney's mouth fell open in shock, eyes wide with horror and disbelief. Denise sat calmly on the other side of the courtroom, her face resolute, yet betraying no satisfaction, only a quiet, fierce determination that truth and justice prevail. Beside her, Marquis sat silently, expression solemn yet steady, quietly absorbing the gravity of the moment. The judge's voice broke the stunned silence with powerful clarity. "Ms. Whitmore, based on this unequivocal evidence, your lawsuit is dismissed immediately with prejudice. Furthermore, I recommend immediate criminal investigation into your actions." Claire sank back into her chair, visibly collapsing beneath the weight of her public humiliation. Cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing her defeat in every detail. The city breathed a collective sigh of relief, vindicated by justice finally prevailing. Claire's manipulation was decisively dismantled, leaving her utterly isolated, stripped of credibility, and facing impending criminal charges. Meanwhile, Officer Briggs's situation rapidly deteriorated alongside Claire's downfall. With mounting evidence from Officer Langston's thorough investigation now circulating widely, Briggs found himself increasingly cornered by both public outrage and internal pressure within the police department. Langston's courageous revelations, combined with Claire's exposed intentions, forced city officials to finally acknowledge and address the serious accusations against Briggs. Police Chief Samuel Richards, under intense scrutiny from both media and City Hall, announced Briggs's immediate suspension during a tense press conference broadcast citywide. "Effective immediately," Chief Richards stated firmly, clearly uncomfortable yet resolute. "Officer Briggs is suspended, pending a full and independent investigation into credible allegations of misconduct and racial bias. We will not tolerate any behavior that undermines trust between our community and law enforcement." Langston watched the announcement unfold from his desk, feeling a profound sense of relief and sadness. He knew Briggs's suspension represented not just accountability for one officer's actions, but a desperately needed step toward broader reform within the department itself. Yet the weight of Langston's own prior silence lingered heavily, a powerful reminder of the courage required to challenge systemic injustice openly. The city responded passionately to the developments, pouring into the streets in peaceful demonstrations, demanding further reforms, increased transparency, and deeper accountability measures within law enforcement. Denise Jefferson appeared prominently alongside community leaders, speaking eloquently about the critical need to build lasting trust and systemic change. "This moment offers us a powerful choice," Denise declared clearly during a packed community town hall meeting. "We can retreat into defensiveness, or we can confront uncomfortable truths head-on. Let's choose justice, accountability, and meaningful reform. Our city deserves nothing less." The community responded with passionate support, applause echoing through the crowded hall. Denise's leadership resonated deeply, inspiring genuine hope and unity across previously divided neighborhoods. Back home that evening, Marquis watched quietly from the living room as news coverage replayed his mother's passionate speech, interspersed with clips of Claire's devastating courtroom defeat. Denise quietly approached, sitting beside him gently. "Are you feeling better about all this now?" she asked softly, placing a comforting arm around him. Marquis nodded slowly, thoughtful. "I guess. It feels better knowing everyone sees the truth. But it still hurts, you know? It still feels unfair." Denise hugged him gently, understanding. "It is unfair, Marquis. None of this should ever have happened, but you've helped so many people by standing strong, by speaking truth. That's something extraordinary. I'm so proud of you." Marquis managed a faint smile, comforted by her steady reassurance. gradually accepting his new reality, a reality forever changed by what had occurred beneath the willow tree. He understood now. Despite lingering pain, his courage mattered profoundly, more than he had ever imagined. Yet, even as Denise and Marquis finally felt some relief, neither realized that Officer Langston's investigation had uncovered something even deeper, something far more systemic and entrenched. Records indicating the police department's pattern of deliberate suppression of similar complaints stretching back years. This hidden evidence was waiting quietly, poised to detonate publicly, thrusting Denise into a new, even more difficult battle against entrenched corruption and political resistance. This explosive discovery would demand even greater courage and strength from Denise and Marquis, challenging them profoundly, but ultimately presenting an unprecedented opportunity to dismantle systemic bias, root out corruption, and reshape their city's future in ways previously unimaginable. The city pulsed with newfound energy. From courthouse steps to classroom walls, from church basements to morning commutes, people were talking. Not just about what had happened beneath the willow tree, but about what should happen next. With Claire's manipulation exposed, Officer Briggs suspended, and the defamation lawsuit reduced to dust, a space had opened, one that Denise Jefferson refused to waste. She moved swiftly. Within a week, Mayor Jefferson's office announced a sweeping policy initiative focused on dismantling systemic bias in law enforcement and rebuilding community trust. It was called the Community Integrity and Equity Plan, and it targeted every level of the city's justice infrastructure, from the language used in training manuals to the structure of community police engagement. It wasn't just symbolic, it was bold, detailed, and unapologetically ambitious. Mandatory anti-bias education would be required not only for law enforcement, but also for emergency dispatchers, city contractors, and public school staff. A new division within the mayor's office would be created to oversee civilian oversight panels and handle complaint escalations independently. For the first time in the city's history, youth representatives would have seats at monthly community safety forums. And perhaps most significantly, the city would launch a comprehensive audit of past misconduct complaints that had been closed without resolution, including every file tied to Officer Briggs and his unit. The announcement was met with immediate applause from advocacy groups and community coalitions, many of whom had been fighting for reforms for years with little movement. But it also sparked resistance. Several city council members, primarily from more conservative districts, voiced concern over anti-police sentiment and accused Denise of pushing through reactionary policies. Denise didn't flinch. She released a public statement the next morning. This is not a reaction, it is a reckoning. And reckoning is long overdue. But while Denise navigated the political battlefield with the precision of a seasoned leader, back home, the weight of it all still settled heavily around Marquis. He had returned to school, but nothing felt the same. Teachers looked at him with overly careful eyes. Classmates whispered too softly or stared too long. His name had become a symbol, and that symbol had swallowed the quiet kid who just wanted to draw futuristic cities and read in the shade of a willow tree. One afternoon, Denise found him sitting silently at the kitchen table, sketch pad untouched, pencil unmoving between his fingers. "You've barely drawn in days," she said softly. Marcus didn't look up. "Everyone wants me to say something. At school, online. They want me to talk about what happened. They keep saying I should speak at the next city hall meeting." "And you don't want to?" she asked gently, taking the seat beside him. "I don't know," he admitted. "It's not just about me anymore. People are using my name in arguments I don't even understand. Some kids at school said, 'I'm just your son,' and that's why people care." Denise's expression softened. "Marquis, people don't care because you're my son. They care because they saw what happened to you. They saw how wrong it was. But what they need, what they really need, is to see who you are." He looked up at her, unsure. She smiled, brushing her hand gently across his knuckles. "You have something they don't, Marquis. You have truth, and you have the courage to tell it. The next evening, Marcus stood behind a closed door inside City Hall, fidgeting with the cuff of his hoodie, heart pounding in his ears. The room beyond was packed. Television crews lined the walls. Council members, activists, clergy, officers, teachers, and students filled every seat. His name had been on the agenda for days now. Everyone was waiting. Denise squeezed his shoulder. You only need to say what's true for you. That's more than enough. He stepped onto the podium slowly, unsure at first, eyes scanning the sea of strangers, flashes of cameras bright in his peripheral vision. The microphone seemed impossibly large. His palms were slick. But then, just near the back row, he saw Tasha. She gave him a nod, and beside her, Officer Langston, his expression quiet, respectful, and honest. Then his mother, seated front and center, hands clasped, face full of pride and patience. And Marquise began, My name is Marquis Jefferson. I'm 13. I like drawing cities that don't exist yet. Cities where everyone's safe, and no one thinks you're dangerous, just for sitting under a tree. The room stilled. Not a cough, not a whisper. I didn't want to be here. I didn't ask for any of this. I was just waiting for my mom. But someone looked at me and decided I was a threat. And when I tried to say I wasn't, no one listened. They believed her, not me. He paused, swallowing hard. Denise held her breath. But what scares me more than that day in the park is thinking about the kids who won't have cameras around. The kids who will get blamed for things they didn't do, and no one will find out the truth. I don't want to be famous. I just want things to be fair. He looked toward the panel now, his voice steadier. I think if we're brave enough to see what's broken, we should be brave enough to fix it. A hush lingered for a long moment. Then came a slow ripple of applause, followed by a surge. Council members stood. People clapped hard, some with tears in their eyes. One by one, members of the crowd rose to their feet. By the time Marquis stepped down from the podium, the entire room was on its feet, applauding. Not just him, but what he represented. Backstage, Denise pulled him into her arms. You did it, she whispered. He exhaled deeply, the pressure leaving his chest. I didn't know if I could. You didn't speak like a politician, she smiled. You spoke like a leader. That night, the clip of Marquis's speech aired across every major news network, hailed as one of the most powerful moments in the city's history. Students quoted his words in their classrooms. Protest signs bore his name beside phrases like "fix what's broken" and "fairness for every child." Even longtime critics of Denise Jefferson admitted the tide had changed. The city, once fractured by suspicion and fear, began to turn toward something new, something honest. Conversations happened that hadn't been possible before. Neighbors crossed fences. Police officers took seats in community forums not to defend themselves, but to listen. And at the center of that movement stood a quiet boy with a sketchbook, who spoke when it mattered most. The courtroom was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that felt safe, but the kind that buzzed beneath the skin, heavy with consequence. Every bench was filled. Reporters sat shoulder to shoulder near the back, their pens still, their phones aimed steady at the front of the room where Claire Whitmore sat stiffly between her attorneys. Her hands were folded tightly on the table, knuckles white. Her gaze stayed forward, jaw set, lips pressed into a thin, tight line. This wasn't a press conference. There were no sympathetic headlines waiting, no curated tears or carefully rehearsed victim statements. This was a criminal arraignment. And this time, Claire Whitmore wasn't holding the microphone. She was facing the law. The charges were read slowly, clearly. Each syllable another weight dropped onto her name. Assault of a minor. Harassment with racial bias. Filing a false police report. Conspiracy to incite fear. The prosecutor, calm and measured, read through the statements of witnesses, the video evidence collected, and the community testimonies submitted in writing. There was no room left for ambiguity. The facts were damning. The world had already seen it. Now the court would decide what came next. Claire's lawyers filed motions and objected often, but nothing could erase the clarity of the footage. The moment she snatched a phone from a child's hands, the shove, the lies, the signals exchanged with a planted accomplice. Everything had been captured. Everything had been seen. The judge denied her bail. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered in protest and solidarity, not just against Claire, but in support of the reforms her actions had inadvertently catalyzed. Signs reading, "Protect our children. Truth is not a threat," and accountability now lined the barricades. Speakers from neighborhood coalitions, school boards, and civil rights groups took to microphones, making it clear this was not a singular event. This was a mirror held to years of unchecked prejudice. But while Claire's case was underway, another battle brewed inside police headquarters. Officer Briggs, suspended, disgraced, but still defiant, had become the rallying point for a small, vocal faction within the department. These were officers who saw the suspension as a political move, who resented the mayor's reforms, who feared their old methods were being scrutinized. Inside closed rooms, they strategized, lobbied internal affairs, and quietly passed around statements painting Briggs as the real victim. The disciplinary hearing convened under tight security, with a review panel assembled from internal affairs, legal experts, and civilian oversight members. Briggs entered the chamber with his chin lifted, flanked by his union attorney and several members of his old precinct. He refused to show remorse. He claimed he followed protocol, that he responded to a citizen's concern, that he feared for his safety, that the child was non-compliant, that the mayor used the incident to further a political agenda. It was the same story, just retold in sharper suits and sterile phrases. But this time, there was more than public anger on the other side of the table. There was evidence. Langston testified first, detailing what he witnessed at the park that day, followed by his own internal investigation into Briggs's history of biased behavior and excessive force complaints. The reports Langston submitted revealed a pattern: cases where people of color had been disproportionately stopped, questioned, and treated with hostility by Briggs. One after another, names appeared. Stories that had been closed quietly or dismissed without follow-up. The panel listened, some grimacing as they reviewed the files. Briggs sat stone-faced, but a slight tremor in his hand betrayed the impact of what was being laid bare. And then it was Marcus's turn. He stood just outside the doors of the hearing room, dressed neatly in a pressed button-down shirt, hands curled tightly around his written statement. Denise crouched beside him, eyes level with his, voice calm and steady. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "Just be honest. Speak from your heart." Marquis nodded slowly. He wasn't shaking like before. His voice, when he spoke, was steadier now. Older, almost. Wiser. Inside, the room fell into hush as he took the seat beside the microphone. Some in the crowd had seen him speak at City Hall. Others only knew him from the videos, but now they were hearing from him. Not a symbol, not a headline, but a boy. A real boy. He cleared his throat and began to read. "My name is Marquis Jefferson. I'm 13. The day I met Officer Briggs, I was sitting under a tree reading a book and sketching while I waited for my mom. I wasn't breaking any laws. I wasn't making trouble. But when a woman started yelling at me, saying I was dangerous, Officer Briggs didn't ask questions. He didn't give me a chance to explain. He saw me the way she wanted him to. His hands tightened on the paper, voice stronger now. He yelled at me like I was a criminal. He put his hand near his weapon. I was scared. Really scared. And no matter what I said, he didn't listen. Because to him, I wasn't a kid. I was a threat." He paused, letting the words sit in the room. Some of the panel members had tears in their eyes. "I'm not here to destroy anyone's career," Marquis continued, his voice softening. But I am here because I don't want this to happen to someone else. Not ever again. People like me shouldn't have to be lucky to make it home safe." When he finished, the silence that followed was full. Not empty, full of realization, of grief, of reckoning. Denise watched from the gallery, her heart bursting with pride. It wasn't the mayor in her who beamed. It was the mother. Briggs never looked at Marquise once during the testimony. He stared at the floor, unmoving. The panel adjourned soon after, promising to review the findings and reach a decision. But in the hallway, as Marquise stepped into the embrace of his mother, and Langston offered a quiet nod of respect, the feeling was undeniable. The tide had turned. The boy they tried to silence had spoken. The officer who refused to listen would now be judged. And the woman who orchestrated it all sat in a cell, awaiting trial. But more than that, something bigger had begun. Something that couldn't be undone. The courthouse brimmed with tension long before the gavel ever struck. It was the first day of the trial, and every seat in the courtroom had been filled before sunrise. Journalists lined the rear wall, notebooks open and cameras blinking silently, capturing the faces of jurors, clerks, and quiet onlookers. Protesters gathered outside, their chants muffled through thick courtroom walls, holding signs that echoed the demands that had taken root since the incident. Justice for Marquise. No more lies. We saw the truth. At the defense table, Claire Whitmore sat rigid, her expression carefully composed, a silk scarf tucked precisely at her collar. She wore the look of someone attempting to exude calm, but her eyes betrayed something else, a flicker of calculation. The last vestiges of a persona that was unraveling thread by thread. Her attorney, a seasoned man with silver hair and a practiced voice, leaned in every few minutes to whisper reassurances she no longer seemed to believe. The charges were severe: assault of a minor, harassment with intent to incite racial fear, filing a false police report, and conspiring to provoke a police escalation under false pretenses. Each charge had emerged not from rumors or assumptions, but from video evidence, witness testimony, and the relentless uncovering of truth. And now, with the world watching, the trial had arrived at its defining moment, the testimony that would either collapse or confirm the foundation of Claire's last defense. When Marquis Jefferson's name was called, the room stilled completely. He rose slowly from his seat beside his mother, his movements composed, his eyes steady. Gone was the trembling child from beneath the willow tree, the boy whose phone had been shattered against the pavement, while his voice was buried beneath someone else's lie. What stood now was a young man shaped by fear, tempered by truth, and strengthened by the unrelenting need to be heard on his own terms. He stepped onto the witness stand and took the oath, his voice clear and steady as he spoke each word. "Marquise," the prosecutor began, standing a respectful distance from the stand, her tone soft but direct. "Could you please tell the court what happened that day? In your own words?" Marquise nodded once, then began. "I was waiting under a tree," he began, "sketching, reading, waiting for my mom. It was quiet, peaceful." His voice didn't waver. He didn't look away. The courtroom listened, the silence deepening with every word. Then Ms. Whitmore came up to me. At first, I thought she was just being nice, but her questions started getting weird. She asked if I knew any of the boys near the court, if I was scouting, if I was in a gang. I said no. I told her I was just waiting. He paused, just long enough for the weight of the moment to land. She didn't believe me. She asked about my phone. I said it was mine. When I tried to use it to call my mom, she grabbed it, ripped it right out of my hand, and threw it to the ground. It broke. I went to pick it up, and that's when she shoved me. Then she started screaming that I attacked her. The murmurs in the gallery were soft but unmistakable. Anger, heartbreak, disbelief at how casually violence had been masked as fear. She said I had a weapon. I didn't. She said I threatened her. I didn't even raise my voice. I didn't even move. until after she broke my phone. The prosecutor stepped in again. Marquise, did you say anything threatening to Ms. Whitmore? No, he said flatly. I didn't say anything that could scare anybody. I was scared. But nobody believed me. He turned slightly, eyes sweeping across the courtroom, landing on the jury. It didn't matter what I said. She was loud. I was just a kid. Everyone listened to her. He stepped down slowly. As he returned to his seat beside Denise, her hand closed over his, grounding him, reminding him that he was no longer alone in telling the truth. Next, the prosecution called Officer Langston. Langston stood and walked to the front with a solemnity that carried the weight of quiet regret. Dressed in his full uniform, badge polished, he moved with purpose, his expression stripped of defense. Once sworn in, he took a breath and faced the court directly. I responded to the scene that day, he began, and when I arrived, I saw a young boy standing alone, arms up. He wasn't moving. He looked scared. Officer Briggs was already there, aggressive, shouting commands, escalating. Did you feel that was necessary? Langston hesitated. No, but I didn't say anything. I told myself I needed more time to assess, but in truth, I was afraid of speaking up. He exhaled, and I was wrong. Langston explained how, after the incident, he began combing through Officer Briggs's personnel file, how he discovered a pattern of behavior, complaints that had never been investigated, claims from other young men, Black and Latino boys, who had described nearly identical encounters. Their reports had been buried, labeled as lacking evidence, forgotten by the very system meant to protect them. The system didn't just fail Marcus, Langston said, voice heavy. It failed all of them, and I failed them too, by staying quiet. When it was Claire's turn to take the stand, she walked slowly, draping herself in the same fragility that had once shielded her, her eyes misted, her hands trembling lightly as she held a tissue to her cheek. Her lawyer stood beside her, voice measured. Ms. Whitmore, can you explain what was going through your mind that day? Claire sniffled softly. I was scared. I saw someone acting suspicious. I didn't know what he might do. I panicked. You had no intention of harming the boy? I only wanted to protect the children in the park. I panicked. You had no intention of harming the boy? I only wanted to protect the children in the park. I was wrong. But I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I've been through so much since then. I've lost everything. The prosecutor approached slowly. Ms. Whitmore, do you recognize this footage? The screen behind the bench came to life. On it, clear as day, Claire stood near a park bench, whispering to a tall white man. You just stay nearby, her voice said crisply. If he looks nervous or tries to walk away, step in. We need him to look threatening. That's the only way this works. When the video ended, Claire didn't speak. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her eyes flicked from the judge to the jury to her attorney. The prosecutor turned. So, Ms. Whitmore. Still scared? Claire lowered her gaze. She didn't answer. And in that stillness, in that room filled with truth and reckoning, the court no longer needed to guess who the victim was. The lies had finally reached their end. The verdict came down just after noon on a Monday, the kind of day that felt ordinary in every other part of the city. Buses groaned down their usual routes, coffee shops steamed with morning orders, children ran through school hallways. But inside the courtroom, nothing about the moment was routine. The judge, having reviewed all evidence and testimony, delivered the decision with calm precision, though the weight of it carried across every row of the gallery. Claire Whitmore, once considered a well-regarded member of her neighborhood association, a woman who had once commanded rooms with her assertiveness and carefully polished persona, was found guilty on all counts. Her conviction included assault on a minor, filing a false police report, inciting public panic, and obstruction of justice. Each charge was tied directly to her intentional actions against Marquis Jefferson, and the sentence reflected the seriousness of her crimes. The judge's words were resolute. Ms. Whitmore, Your actions were not born of fear, but of calculation. You exploited public trust and racial bias to provoke a situation that could have ended in tragedy. This court cannot and will not minimize the danger you posed, nor the irreparable harm you attempted to cause. She was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, followed by a mandatory period of supervised probation. In addition to her sentence, Claire was barred from holding any public-facing role in any community organization and ordered to pay financial restitution to the Jefferson family for emotional and material damages, though no sum could ever truly compensate for what had nearly been taken. Outside the courthouse, the city exhaled, not in celebration, but in collective acknowledgement that, for once, justice had not been delayed or denied. Protest signs came down slowly. News vans pulled away. And amid the shifting mood, a different kind of energy took hold, one grounded in movement, not anger. Officer Briggs, too, faced the consequences of his role. The disciplinary board convened one final time to review the full scope of Langston's report, the courtroom testimony, and prior complaints that had never been addressed. The decision was unanimous. Briggs was permanently stripped of his badge and certification. An internal criminal referral was filed immediately, and he was formally charged with civil rights violations, falsifying reports, and dereliction of duty. The fallout inside the police department was seismic, not only because of his removal, but because of what it revealed. Decades of quiet compliance, a culture that had looked away for too long. In the days that followed, the walls of City Hall echoed with urgent discussion, not about whether reform was necessary, but about how swiftly it could be implemented. Mayor Denise Jefferson, having already launched the Community Integrity and Equity Plan, weeks earlier, now carried the public's full attention and momentum. What had once been considered politically risky was now undeniably urgent. Under her leadership, the City Council voted unanimously to adopt the Jefferson Reform Package into law. Its reach was wide. Mandatory bias training for all city employees, community advisory boards with real oversight power, the creation of an independent civilian review board with investigative authority, and the opening of a new youth advocacy office that would include student liaisons from every district. Schools, police precincts, and neighborhood centers began hosting listening forums. Conversations that had previously been avoided now happened openly, with shared accountability. Language changed. Structures changed. Slowly, but visibly, the city began to shift. Marquis, though still just 13, became something no one had expected, not even himself. He didn't seek out the spotlight. He never chased attention. But when he spoke, people listened, not because of what had happened to him, but because of how he chose to carry it. In the weeks following the trial, he was invited to join the new Youth Civic Council, representing not only his school, but also the many students across the city who had felt unseen. At first, he hesitated. He told his mother, one evening over dinner, that he wasn't sure if he was ready to be that voice all the time. Denise, gently sipping her tea across the table, looked at him and said, "You don't have to be everything to everyone. You just have to be yourself, and that will be more than enough." He joined. Marquis sat in front of panels and listened carefully. He gave thoughtful suggestions. He met with officers newly assigned to community programs and told them honestly what safety should feel like from the eyes of a black child in a city park. His sketchbook, once filled with imagined cities and science fiction skylines, began to take on new shapes. Town halls with glass walls, parks with open spaces, and benches facing each other. Centers filled with light and language from every culture in the city. One evening, months after the trial, he stood at the front of his old school auditorium during a youth leadership event. He had grown taller. His voice was deeper now, his posture more certain. Behind him was a screen showing slides of the reform work being done. In front of him sat students, teachers, and members of the press. He didn't speak like a politician. He didn't rehearse lines. But when he began, the room quieted. I used to think justice was something adults handed out when the system worked. But I learned that justice is actually something we all have to build. Every day, piece by piece. Sometimes we build it by telling the truth, even when it's hard. Sometimes we build it by listening to people we don't understand. And sometimes we build it by refusing to let people like Claire Whitmore decide who belongs in public spaces. There was no standing ovation, no thunderous applause, just quiet respect. People leaning forward, people listening, and that was enough. At home later that night, Denise tucked away her coat, kicked off her shoes, and watched Marquis lean over his desk, sketching once again. This time, his drawing showed a community center surrounded by trees. At the center, beneath a curved roof of solar panels, stood a tall figure with a raised hand. Not as a warning, but as a welcome. She didn't interrupt. She simply smiled and walked past, knowing her son was building something lasting, not just on paper, but in the world around him. By the time the city settled into its new rhythm, the trial had long since ended. The headlines had quieted, and the noise surrounding Claire Whitmore and Officer Briggs had faded into the background. What remained was something deeper. Something that didn't need flashing cameras or shouting voices to be felt. Claire served her sentence behind concrete walls, no longer a woman of influence or reputation, but a cautionary echo of what unchecked bias could become. Briggs faced his own reckoning, not only stripped of his badge, but permanently removed from the ranks of those sworn to protect. The system that had once shielded them was no longer intact. It had been exposed, reshaped, rebuilt under the weight of truth, and the insistence that silence would no longer be protection. And in the heart of the city, the mayor's office stood with its doors open wider than ever. What once had been policy printed on paper was now woven into practice. Officers trained in listening before acting, schools equipped with restorative programs, and community panels where young voices weren't just heard, they were sought out. The city was far from perfect, but it was honest in its pursuit of better. Marquis changed too, not into someone louder or more public, but into someone grounded. He still returned to that same park sometimes, walking past the willow tree where it had all begun. The tree hadn't changed. Its branches still moved gently in the wind, the grass around it still soft and quiet. But Marquis saw it differently now, not just as a place of peace, but a place where he discovered his own power. He spoke occasionally at schools, not with speeches, but with stories. He sat with kids who had their own versions of what he'd gone through and listened. Sometimes he sketched with them. Other times, he just let the silence do the work. Because he had learned that change didn't always roar. It often started with something smaller, a voice, a question, a moment. And in that same city, where once a boy was nearly lost to a lie, a new truth took root. Not in laws alone, but in people, in how they showed up for each other, in how they paid attention, in how they chose to see not what they were told, but what was true. Marquis Jefferson didn't go looking for justice, but when justice needed someone to carry it forward, he didn't look away, and from that moment on, neither did the city. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.